It's like deja vu, and that's probably because it happens every year. The United States is again standing at a point of running out of money, and each year, just before the deadline, it somehow manages to stay afloat. After all, how can the world's largest economy fall short of funds? Well, it's not that simple. The debt ceiling is basically a legal limit. It sets the amount of money the government can borrow to pay its bills. This could be for paying the employees, social security, as well as tax refunds. The government takes in revenue from taxes and other streams like customs duties, but every year it spends more than it takes in. In case the government needs more money, then a formal voting is initiated to either raise the limit or suspend it completely. The cap currently stands at roughly $31.4 trillion. The problem is that this limit was breached in January. So the Treasury Department stepped in and used its extraordinary measures to hand out cash to the government. But that does not end the crisis. The money borrowed above the set limit needs to get a formal approval by the Congress. And this is where the actual issue starts. The picture on your screens perfectly describes the situation right now. The President, the Vice President, the House Speaker and the Senate Majority Leader, they all gathered to discuss the road ahead, but they are not on the same page. Joe Biden has even shortened his upcoming Asia tour to address the issue. The debt limit debate brings out one of the most fundamental differences between the Democrats and Republicans. For the Reds, rising national debt is evidence of out-of-control government. But for the Blues, they have a more moral perspective here, where the government is supposed to improve American lives and cash flow is necessary for that. So what happens if debt ceiling is not raised and Washington actually runs out of money? Well, to be fair, this has never happened before in immediate terms. The salaries won't be paid of federal and military employees. Social security checks will be put on hold. But in the broader sense, it would cause major economic damage. Imagine the debt crisis colliding with the ongoing banking crisis. These are unprecedented times and businesses are already not in a good shape. And US has high chances of slipping into a recession. A crisis like this could mean access to credit could be made difficult. Some economists are also warning of mass layoffs. The collapse could even play into China's favor. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen has drawn the red line. She says if the debt limit is not raised by the 1st of June, then day-to-day obligations will also be hindered. That date is 2 weeks from now. For more, we're being joined by our correspondent Susan Tehrani from New York and Raymond Vickery, who joins us from Washington. Raymond is a former U.S. Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Trade Development and Senior Associate at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Welcome to the broadcast, Susan and Raymond.
Thank you for having me.
Susan, I'd like to start with you first. Now, the move is being seen as a domestic policy undermining international foreign policy. How should we look at this further?
Yeah, I mean, it will definitely really cause lingering doubts, not only among America's allies, but also adversaries as well, about America's staying power on the one hand. And it also comes at a time when the Biden administration's pivot to Asia was really gaining momentum. The Indo-Pacific was something that this administration was hyper-focused on. And then with this, it just leaves a bad message, sends a bad message to countries. It's also deja vu for what President Barack Obama did back in 2013. What he did was he skipped a planned appearance at the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation. And that was amid talks of a shutdown here in the United States. And what happened there was Xi Jinping really took note, and he sort of thrived, for a lack of a better word, at that conference without the presence of the United States and Barack Obama.
Right. Raymond, I would like to come to you next. Now, 78 times in the past, the US has acted to avert default. Do you really feel there is a default situation this time?
Well, I think this is a unique challenge for democracy, and it shows how democracy, whether it be in India or the US, requires a certain amount of cooperation and national interest as opposed to narrow party interest. In this situation, unfortunately, we have a small caucus, relatively small in the House of Representatives, that wants a rule or ruin approach to government. They believe that the government is best which governs least, and the logical conclusion is that the very best is to really not have any government unless they get it completely on their terms. And if you look at the bill which has been passed by the House of Representative Republicans, it shows that this is really a unique ideological battle. What's going on here is an attack on the Internal Revenue Service that collects taxes. Actually would increase the deficit, but there has grown up this myth that somehow tax collection is being weaponized against conservative Republicans, and it must be reined in. There are also provisions to roll back climate change initiatives of the Biden administration to starve of money and increase the reliance on fossil fuels. So it's really a unique ideological battle, and although I don't expect there to be a default, this time there is more worry than ever.
I'd like to cut back to our correspondent Susan. Susan, would a deal necessarily sound an all-clear signal for the U.S. economy?
Well, it'll prevent that all-out catastrophe that Janet Yellen had been warning about. But on the other hand, it would send stocks sinking. It would push up interest rates, and it could do a lot more damage. Like back in 2011, when America's credit rating was downgraded from AAA to AA+. So it will have ripple effects ultimately, even if an 11th hour deal is reached, according to some analysts.
Right. Raymond, now I just need to bring in a little perspective before I ask you next. John Kirby had insisted yesterday several times that Biden could do both things simultaneously. That is the debt talks at home and the trip for Quad meeting and New Papua Guinea. Does it now throw questions upon U.S. unreliability for Asia-Pacific countries, some of which were expecting the president?
Well, I think there's already been damage done by the approach of the House of Representatives. And the point that you make in regard to the Quad is a good one. It does interfere with the conduct of international relations. On the other hand, we already have a visit scheduled for Prime Minister Modi this coming month in Washington, and a state dinner. And those ties remain very strong. The Quad summit meeting has not been canceled. It has been postponed. But as has been pointed out, the ripple effects of this kind of approach of rule or ruin to democracy has effects across the board, including in foreign policy. But I don't expect there to be any weakening of U.S.-India relations, which are strong and bipartisan. What we have to worry about, of course, is this unintended consequences across the board in international relations.
All right. Thank you, Susan and Raymond Vickery, for joining us on the broadcast. Susan, stay with us. We'll be back with you for more updates on the next story.